So let's explain the Balaji bet, since that trended, and he is the boy who, as you're saying, cried wolf this past week.
Cried Bitcoin.
Yeah, the boy cried Bitcoin. Very well said. So a friend of the pod, Balaji, on March 17th, predicted that Bitcoin will reach $1 million in 90 days due to U.S. hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is defined as prices going up 50% month over month, just so we're clear on exactly how dramatic that is. He made the bet on March 17th against a pseudonymous Twitter user, James Medlock, who said they would bet 1 million that the U.S. would not experience hyperinflation. So Balaji sort of inserted Bitcoin into that bet. It wasn't a Bitcoin bet then, and I think he's done 2 of these bets. So he's betting 2 million in total on Bitcoin hitting 1 million by June 17th, which there's probably no chance of that happening, or a very tiny chance. I'll ask the panel in a second. Bitcoin was trading at 26,000 at the time. It's now trading at over 28,000. And Balaji has been on every podcast known to man in the last 72 hours talking about this. I've watched 1 or 2 of them. And it's a pretty out there argument, I think. You can just type in Balaji on YouTube and watch any of the 20 he's done. He believes regional banks are insolvent. He thinks the Fed's is going to need to print a massive amount of money, like we've said here, do more QE, and then cut rates. It all seems reasonable. But that will lead to hyperinflation.
It's not reasonable.
Well, no, it's not that it's reasonable. We just printed that they're going to cut rates. We just discussed they're going to eventually cut rates, and there'll be more QE. So that part is reasonable. Just that one little piece. But then he believes is the part that is kind of out there, that hyperinflation is going to devalue the dollar, and this is the time. He does not, and I made a bunch of, I asked him this a bunch of times, and he would not be honest about it, or didn't want to answer my question. I said, hey, what percentage are you in Bitcoin? Somebody says he's 99% in Bitcoin. He will not confirm. And so I was like, well, if you own 1,000 Bitcoins, if this goes up, a very small amount, 4 or 5%, you're going to pay for the bets. And are you talking your own book here or not? Sachs, what do you think of this overall bet? Is it a stunt?
Yeah.
He's saying like this is the lifeboats moment. And just to add to it, he says you have to leave the United States and get to Singapore or a place, or if you're going to stay in the United States, you need to get to Wyoming or Texas or somewhere that explicitly allows Bitcoin, because the closer you are to the United States banking system, what happened to Silicon Valley Bank on that fateful weekend where people couldn't get their cash and we're going to have to, miss payroll? He says that's the dry run for the entire U.S. banking system. Sachs.
So first of all, I don't think you can disparage Balaji, because someone who cries wolf says this repeatedly and makes a dire prediction repeatedly and is wrong. And we can't say yet that Balaji is wrong. Do I think that we're going to have $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days? I personally find that very unlikely, but you can't say yet. He stuck his neck out making a prediction that will be easily falsified if he's wrong. Second, the last time that Balaji made a dire prediction was COVID. And he was right about that one. So you can't say that this is just like a doomer who throws out crazy predictions and is always wrong. He's actually pretty selective about his
nailed that one.
Predictions. Yeah, there was a tweet from January 30th of 2020 in which he basically predicted a pandemic based on a coronavirus and laid out a whole bunch of consequences that mostly came true. Which is why we're talking about this. This is not just some like random person. Like he actually has a pedigree and a track record. But here's my view on it: is
in doom and gloom.
Yeah, he is.
Him and Nassim Taleb, the 2 of our opening speakers at All In Summit 2023. Those would be our bookend speakers. Book them now.
Yeah, anyway, so look now. What do I think about it? I posted my own theory today, which I would call sort of Balaji light, which is. Okay, look, if you think about this spike in interest rates that we've had, and that Chamath thinks will actually continue quite a bit longer, there are 3 main effects that it indisputably has. Number 1, undercuts the value of long-dated bonds. Number 2, it's made lending much more expensive, particularly for big purchases like real estate. Number 3, it's increased government lending costs. Okay, now, play that through the financial system. What does that mean? Well, if the value of long-dated bonds has sharply decreased, well, that's led to this banking crisis with the unrealized losses. That's already happened. Number 2, it's made lending more expensive. The credit crunch and CRE, we're beginning to see that. And I believe that's going to play out as the second crisis of this larger financial crisis. And then number three is the increase in government borrowing costs. That will eventually play out in terms of being a government debt crisis of some kind. And I think it'll involve, a spike in borrowing costs at the federal level. It'll involve sovereign debt issues internationally. I think it'll involve budget deficits at states and cities. So I think there's three phases to this financial crisis. We're in phase one, and I think CRE and government debt are the next two phases. And I think a lot of that lines up with what Balaji thinks. Where I disagree with him is I don't think we can know what's going to happen in 90 days. I think that the CRE crisis is highly deflationary. It's going to create distress everywhere in the economy. That is going to lead to a massive reduction in liquidity. I think that the government debt crisis, assuming the government wants to inflate and monetize the debt as a way to solve that problem, that will be highly inflationary. But when these things play out, we can't know. I think that's what makes this really hard is I think jumping all the way to the sort of finish line and saying we're going to have $1 million Bitcoin in 90 days because the US dollar is worthless, I think that's premature. I think this could play out over the next couple of years.